Welcome to San Francisco Bay Physicians for Social Responsibility's Gala. We will start in just a few moments. Please post a little bit about yourself in the chat. Also, I want to inform you we are recording.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight for San Francisco Bay PSR's annual gala. I am Dr. Tova Fuller, Vice President of the SFBayPSR Board, Chair of the Nuclear Weapons Abolition Committee, and a National PSR Board member. I will be your host this evening. Please make yourselves comfortable and get ready for an amazing evening. We have a thrilling lineup for you. Tonight, we're honored to present keynote speaker Tina Cordova, co-founder of the Tularosa Basin Downwinders Consortium and a cancer survivor. Ms. Cordova is featured in the new award-winning documentary, First We Bombed New Mexico. She's catalyzed a national movement to draw attention to the impact of the world's first nuclear bomb detonation on thousands of New Mexicans, mostly Hispanic and Native American. After a key presentation, we will hear a community update by J. Michelle Pierce, Executive Director of the Advocates, the oldest San Francisco environmental justice community organization located in Bayview Hunters Point. And then we will celebrate our 2024 interns and our emerging health activist awardees. Please stay until the end to celebrate these amazing young people. Before we start our program, we want to acknowledge that SFBayPSR is located on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone, Miwok, Yokuts, and Patwins people, who are the original inhabitants and continue to inhabit the San Francisco Bay Area. And for those of you who are new to San Francisco Bay Physicians for Social Responsibility, welcome. I'd like to tell you a little bit about our work. SFBayPSR combines the power of community activism with the knowledge and credibility of health professionals to promote public policies that support human and environmental health. Founded in 1979, SFBayPSR mobilizes health professionals, public health experts, scientists, researchers, community organizers, students, and advocates to promote solutions to the intertwined public and environmental health emergencies posed by nuclear weapons and militarism, our accelerating climate crisis, and the deep injustices rooted in structural inequality and racism. And now I'd like to hand the mic over to our Executive Director, Marge Plum.
Thank you, Tova. So let me tell all of you, friends, colleagues, and donors who have joined this gala that 2024 has been an extraordinary year with many opportunities and achievements. And we are looking ahead to 2025 nervously, but with hope. I'd like to share with you just a few highlights of San Francisco Bay PSR's 2024 environmental health accomplishments and projects. This year, we worked closely to support the efforts of environmental justice organizations around the Bay Area. The Richmond Shoreline Alliance, the Marin City Climate Resilience and Health Justice, and Bayview Hunters Point Community Advocates in San Francisco to support their efforts to address the hazardous waste, chemical and radiation, contaminated land, and harmful air pollution in their communities. We remain laser focused on protecting communities from the health harms of the oil and gas industries and to eventually ending fossil fuels in California. We deepened our work in allyship with environmental justice organizations in the Vision Coalition, PSR LA, and Last Chance Alliance. We have joined with other advocates by signing on to dozens of advocacy projects using our health voices to counter the influence of oil, gas, and other industries on our California legislature, advocating for the most health and climate protective bills that would make polluters pay to clean up idle wells, create protective setback zones from oil wells for schools and homes, make it easier for schools to purchase electric buses and install solar, provide more support for the electrification of our homes, and much more. Today, Governor Newsom signed 3 important bills into law, allowing local communities to block construction of new oil and gas wells in their communities, to increase oil industry requirements to plug and clean up idle oil and gas wells, and prohibiting the operation of oil and gas wells located in Inglewood. There are still important bills on his desk. Tomorrow, please keep your eyes out for one of our action alerts that will include the list of health protective bills that still need to be signed into law. We need as many health professionals and advocates as possible to call or email the governor this week. Our health professionals have been on the front lines, meeting with policymakers, giving public comments, writing letters and op-eds to require health warning labels on gas stoves sold in California, and to advocate for zero-emission home appliance rules in the Bay Area and at the state level that would phase in clean electric appliances and greatly improve our air quality and health outcomes. We are working with a network of nonprofits and community energy providers, some of our generous sponsors tonight, thank you very much, to advance a just transition to build electrification that keeps the health and needs of underserved communities front and center. To that end, we have been presenting at many community events and electrification fairs across the Bay Area. And we continue to work with the San Francisco Environment Department to help build their Climate Equity Hub, which aims to utilize the clean energy transition as an opportunity to address inequities by developing programs that make electrification financially beneficial for EJ communities. We are collaborating with the advocates on a joint grant aimed at educating the Bayview community about the health risks associated with gas appliances. This initiative includes a pilot project that will serve as a model for other projects, the installation of electric appliances replacing gas burning ones at the Potrero Hill Neighborhood House, which has a childcare, community events, mental health services, and a food bank on site. Keep your eyes out for an invitation to the Electric Open House celebration later this year. We have also been working with Sierra Club on a webinar to train health professionals and advocates about the health harms and risks of blending hydrogen for use in homes. See the link in the chat to learn more. And of course, there is the election. We are asking everyone to register to vote, to help others to register to vote, and to help get out the vote. Please see the link in the chat to a page of resources, especially for health advocates and health professionals. And now I'd like to hand the mic back to Tova to talk about our nuclear weapons abolition work. Tova?
Since we last gathered in 2023, our work on nuclear weapons abolition and peace advocacy has become more important with the continued bloody war in Ukraine, as well as the ever-escalating conflict in the Mideast that has followed Hamas's horrific attack on Israel last October 7th and led to Israel's continued disproportionate bombing and killing of tens of thousands of Palestinians, and now spread to Lebanon, creating one of the worst humanitarian crises of our time. Both of these wars, replete with dangers of nuclear escalation, have drained our budgets for vast social needs, all while our country has continued to modernize our deadly nuclear weapons arsenal, estimated at approximately $4 to $6 million per hour over the coming decades. As a part of meeting this challenge, SFBayPSR continues to support the Back from the Brink campaign, a coalition working together on a multi-year campaign to rid the world of nuclear weapons while securing a set of common sense U.S. nuclear weapons policies that will make the world safer, healthier, and more just. We also co-organized events on Hiroshima and Nagasaki days to commemorate the victims of the World War II bombings of Japan and protested the accelerated nuclear weapons work at Lawrence Livermore Lab, during which some of our members were arrested for engaging in nonviolent civil disobedience. PSR members have for decades been leaders in the Peace Caucus of the nationwide American Public Health Association. We gave talks to students at Stanford and UCSF, and we continue to give testimony and advocate for the expedited closing of the aging Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant that dangerously strides numerous fault lines and remains an expensive false solution to our climate crisis, starving out safer, renewable sources of energy. This year, we also hosted a talk by a young PSR fellow, Jack Kelly, on the threats of AI to our safety and health, highlighting the risks of AI being used for surveillance and human rights abuses, nuclear command and control, and warfare in general. And Dr. Bob Gould spoke at a press conference that was covered by major TV stations and news sources, advocating for Governor Newsom to sign the bill just passed into the California legislature that would put some needed regulatory limits on AI to better protect our public from both well-understood and unanticipated risks. And of course, foremost on our minds tonight is our years-long work with National PSR to advocate for the reinitiation and expansion of the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act that would provide needed compensation to those whose health has been impacted by the American nuclear weapons development and testing, including over 200 above-ground nuclear tests from 1945 to 1962. These poisoned residents of New Mexico and many other downwinder communities. We're looking forward to hearing from our speaker, Tina Cordova, tonight about the latest congressional talks on this, underscoring our collective need to urgently help get out the vote during these next 2 months. Please see the link in the chat with more information. And as I mentioned, we are thrilled to be celebrating our emerging health professional awardees and to hearing about their important work later this evening. Please consider giving to the Dr. Tom Hall Student and Young Professionals Fund. Our goal tonight is to raise $5,000 for 2025's internship and award programs. This will fund 3 to 4 interns and provide financial awards to our young professionals who will be honored at next year's gala. Please consider making a gift. The link will be posted in the chat. Now, it is time for our esteemed speakers. Please post your questions in the chat, and Tina Cordova and Michelle Pierce will answer them at the end of their talks. With that, it's my great pleasure to introduce SFBayPSR Board President, Dr. Bob Gould.
Thanks so much, Tova. And I really want to welcome everybody who's come out tonight and for all your incredibly generous support. So before we bring Ms. Cordova on, I just wanted to extend our great appreciation for the generous support that many of you online and many others who aren't here tonight have given us. I want to particularly salute our individual sponsors and to particularly highlight the very generous sustaining donors, including Drs. Barbara Ernie, Drs. Jan Kirsch, and Drs. Tom Newman and Joanna Newman, and all the rest of the wonderful people who contributed so much that you see here. I also want to thank our very generous institutional sponsors, which really made quite a difference this year. You could see them all here. A particular shout out to UCSF as a sustaining institution, and also want to mention, of course, I know a lot of people from UCSF are on the call.
Look at that. That's so typical.
How generous they've been in terms
bloody
of
things
giving
and
us
trucks.
I think someone's mic is on.
Bands of stuff all over them to hold them together, and it's just
Okay, sorry we had that interruption, but in any way, I want to just again underscore the very generous support of our institutional donors. So what I would like to do now is move to our main event, which is to introduce Tina Cordova, and a great honor to have her here tonight. Tina Cordova is a seventh-generation native New Mexican, born and raised in the small town of Tularosa in south central New Mexico. In 2005, Tina co-founded the Tularosa Basin Downwinders Consortium with the late Fred Tyler. The mission of the consortium is to bring attention to the negative health effects suffered by the unknowing, unwilling, uncompensated, innocent victims of the first nuclear blast on Earth that took place at the Trinity site in south central New Mexico. Ultimately, the goal of many of the organizers and the consortium is the passage of the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act amendments to bring much needed healthcare coverage and compensation to people suffering from the health effects of that nuclear test. Tina herself is a cancer survivor, having been diagnosed with thyroid cancer when she was 39 years old. She has a Master's of Science degree in biology and a minor in chemistry. She is the past chair of the board of the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and she's been widely honored as a civic leader across many fields statewide and nationally, including being honored by National PSR last year. This year, it was an incredible honor for me to work with Tina exploring these issues and, of course, linking nuclear, climate, and other environmental health effects organized by Project ECHO of the University of New Mexico. And it's a delight to see her again here tonight. And just also want to really thank Tina for all her continued incredible work to secure the passage of RECA, including her hard work today and other days this week trying to get this passage in Congress. So before we invite Tina to speak, we'd like to segue very quickly to show the trailer to the new movie that's come out chronicling the work of Tina and the Tularosa Basin Downwinders Consortium.
My mom said something very profound one time. She said, "You think if my husband and I had known that our kids were going to get poisoned, we would have stayed here? We would have done everything we could to get ourselves out of here, but no one ever told us."
Bombs were developed here, built here, and researched here, are stored here, and then they're buried here.
The U.S. government tested the first ever atomic bomb at the Trinity site in south central New Mexico. We were unwilling, unknowing, uncompensated participants in the world's largest science experiment.
Bob Alvarez asked an American official once, why didn't you do any studies of these downwinders? And the official told him off the record, well, what if we found something?
They counted on us to be unsophisticated, uneducated, and unable to speak up for ourselves. We're not those people anymore. I'm not that person.
General Groves and Oppenheimer said, in the future, we've got to be at least 150 miles from population.
The plutonium has a half-life of 24,000 years. I'm sure
7,000 generations.
Yeah, I'm sure it's still, thank you, 7,000 generations.
Look at all them hills. Every one of them got a ranch on it. And everybody died of the same thing.
Many of these people, I think, are in a way forgotten guinea pigs. They were sacrificed to national security.
We have over 500 abandoned uranium mines between Laguna and Acoma Pueblo and the Navajo Nations. They extracted 32 million tons of uranium. American citizens were harmed in this process, and we have been relegated to nothingness. We don't exist as far as our government is concerned. I will continue to do this until the day that they finally acknowledge or until the day that they put me in the ground.
Ms. Cordova.
That's how lies work. You tell them long enough and people believe them.
Wow. Looking forward to seeing that film when it's released later this year. And Tina, we really are so honored that you're here tonight to talk about these issues, and hand the mic to you now.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me to participate in your annual gala. It's an honor to be here and a privilege, actually, to be surrounded by all of you who I know support the work that we do. The last couple of days have been difficult days, and I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. But to have something positive to do after the last 2 days is going to lift me up and send me home in a positive mood from this place. I want to thank Bob for everything that he's done to support us and to keep the word about our work out there in the public realm. And I want to thank all of you at PSR. I want to thank PSR nationally for the honor that they bestowed on me last year with the Hero of Health Award. It was totally unexpected and greatly appreciated. I want to move right along into my presentation. And my goal tonight is to actually talk a little bit about the science of Trinity, the nature of Trinity, the nature of our lifestyles, which actually led to a very high level of exposure to radiation. I'm going to talk to you about the consequences of all of that, and then we're going to speak about RECA. So first of all, for those of you who do not know this, the bomb was detonated in south central New Mexico, and there were essentially 13,000 children, women, and men living in a 50-mile radius to the test site. That actually meant that we lived far too close to a nuclear test site. And while the government has always described the area as remote and uninhabited, reality is that that is not true. If you draw a radius at 150 miles from the test site, you're talking about 500,000 people, because it encompassed Albuquerque and Santa Fe to the north, and El Paso and Ciudad Juarez to the south. So 500,000 people within a 150-mile radius. The other thing about Trinity is many people tell me, well, they didn't know what they were doing, but the truth is they knew full well what they were doing. And how did they know that? Well, first of all, it was a well-established fact in 1945 that radiation was detrimental to human health. That was not something that was unknown at the time. And secondly, they did a test run of Trinity in May of 1945. They took conventional explosives, laced them with radiation, and then actually followed where the radiation went to monitor what would happen. July happens to be the most turbulent weather that we have in New Mexico. It's our rainy season. It's when we receive most of our annual rainfall. And the test was done on July 16th, 1945. They placed the bomb on a platform 100 feet off the ground. To give you guys the perspective of what that meant, the major force of the bomb came down, intercepted the earth, took up an enormous amount of dirt, sand, animal, and plant life, incinerated it because it created 10,000 times the heat of the sun. And then it developed into a radioactive cloud that kept rising and growing as it rose, and it exceeded the atmosphere, penetrated the stratosphere. The estimate is that it ascended over 60,000 feet. Obviously, when something goes up like that, it has to eventually come down, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. The other thing about the bomb is that it actually was packed with 13 pounds of weapons-grade plutonium when only 3 pounds were necessary for the fission process. That means that a full 10 pounds of radioactive plutonium with a half-life of 24,000 years was spread across the desert of New Mexico, and no one knows for certain where it went. There's no way for us to know. We'll never know. So it produced a massive radioactive cloud, and there was fallout that fell from the sky for days afterwards. The reason that we were so incredibly overexposed is because our lifestyles in 1945 predisposed us for that. We did not have running water. At that time, we were collecting water in cisterns. Obviously, our lakes and rivers and creeks and our acequias, our ditch systems, would have been filling up with water. It was our rainy season, as I mentioned before. So now our water was contaminated. Secondly, we didn't have electricity, so we had no grocery stores. You could shop in a mercantile store. You could get things like sugar, flour, coffee, rice, cereal, but you couldn't buy meat or dairy or produce. All of those things were produced by your own family, by your own means at your own home. And so now our entire food supply, our entire water supply was actually poisonous. They didn't warn us before or afterwards. We did not know the dangers associated with this. And people went about their lives the same way they had always lived. And there's essentially the three modes for exposure. Inhalation, so as the ash fell from the sky in the days afterwards, we would have been inhaling the radioactive dust. There's ingestion, which I've already described. And then if you don't have running water, you don't bathe as often. And so you can absorb the radiation through your skin. And as the ash fell from the sky, people likely were coated in that, and it stayed on their skin and on their scalp until the time that they could actually bathe and wash it away. We had an uptick in infant mortality in the months directly after Trinity. We went from losing 30 babies per thousand to losing something like 100 babies per thousand. And we believe those numbers are very understated because most babies were born at home and their births were not recorded initially. And so their deaths were not recorded. We've been collecting the data, and we have looked at every death certificate that we can access because some of them are not accessible for 1945. And indeed, we're finding that babies died and their deaths are recorded in Catholic church records, but there are no death certificates to actually document their actual deaths. The government has never come back to atone for that or to address that in any way. And so the first victims of an atomic bomb were actually American children, and these children were dying in a fashion that would coincide with what would happen if you were overexposed to radiation. Listed on death certificates are things like summer diarrhea, marasmus, dysentery, gastroenteritis, and what's worse, as you all will likely understand and know, the mothers were likely concentrating radiation in their mammary glands and feeding their babies breast milk, and those babies could not overcome the radiation load they were receiving. In my own family, I'm the fourth generation to have cancer since 1945. Both my great-grandfathers, who were alive at the time in Tularosa, living 45 miles from the test site, developed stomach cancer in 1955. As you all well know, we didn't have terrific diagnostic techniques then. We'll never know for certain. They were told it was stomach cancer. They were given morphine. They were sent home to die. And after several months of suffering, they both died. Both my grandmothers had cancer. My father died after having 2 primary oral cancer tumors. Didn't smoke, didn't drink alcohol much, never would put chewing tobacco in his mouth, had no viruses. And when I asked the doctors in New Mexico at the cancer center, how does this happen to somebody? These 2 cancers basically developed 8 years apart. How does this happen to somebody without risk factors? And they said it just doesn't. But in New Mexico, we see it all the time. There were probably likely about 5 men from Tularosa being treated. It's a town of 3,000 people being treated for the same sort of cancer as my father when my father was going through that treatment. My father had prostate cancer in between the 2 oral cancers. I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer at the age of 39. Now I have a niece that goes to school in San Jose. She's studying art. She is 24 years old, and at the age of 23, she was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. She's the 5th generation in our family, and we have stopped asking in our family who will be next because we don't ask, if we're going to get cancer. We ask when it's going to be our turn. It's horrific to me that now our children and possibly my grandchildren could suffer the same consequences. And when they detonated that bomb in New Mexico, they didn't just set the course of history for those people who were alive at the time and who were exposed to radiation at the time. They set the course of history for the rest of us, because we now have the genetics for this, and we're seeing it manifest in children younger and younger. There's a child in my little town of 3,000. At the age of 2, she developed retinoblastoma. They have removed her left eye, and her other eye is at risk. And we don't have adequate resources or access to healthcare. So our town holds bake sales and rummage sales and gathers together to raise the money so they can take these children out of state because we never have run-of-the-mill cancers. We always have something that's just astronomical, very rare, very hard to treat. We just recently found out Dr. Ketterer, professor emeritus from Northern Arizona University, took soil, water, and plant samples in the canyons around Los Alamos that are open to public. These are spaces that they said were remediated, and he found the highest levels of plutonium any place in the world. He's tested at places like Chernobyl and other sites and found the highest level of plutonium any place in the world. I don't have to tell you all. We know what the physiological effects are. It's disease and disease process, but we also suffer from mental and psychological issues associated with this, to say nothing of the financial ruin that it leaves families in when they spend everything that they have to address their medical needs. And at the end of their life, all they pass on is medical debt. So where are we today? Well, the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act bill, the amendment to expand that bill to include the people of New Mexico and other places in the American West where we were subject to testing, above ground testing, and also in Guam, we had a bill that addressed those places. We were going to add all of those places to the current RECA, along with the post-71 uranium miners. And it passed in the US Senate by a vote of 69 to 30. And you all know we never see a vote like that in the US Senate. We were overjoyed. On the same day, President Biden issued a statement of support for that bill. And in the 19 years that I've been doing this work, we've never had a president acknowledge us. That was a wonderful day for us as downwinders and uranium workers. But what has happened since then is that one person, Speaker Mike Johnson, has blocked the bill when we're told that we have the votes in the US House. He will not allow the bill to come forward for a vote. And what he says over and over is that it's going to cost too much. And what we say over and over is that when you develop a budget and you are willing to spend our tax dollars developing nuclear weapons, building new plutonium pits, which they're going to do at Los Alamos, which we're ramping up to do at Los Alamos right now. When you're going to do that and you don't include a line item for taking care of the American citizens that have been harmed in the process, then you're not doing your job and you're not completing your job. We know what we know, and we're not going to stand for this any longer. We've spent $10 trillion on our nuclear program since their inception. RECA has paid out $2.5 billion in 34 years. It's a pittance. The current bill has a price tag of $50 billion, and they still feel it's untenable. But let me tell you where we're at today. The documentary is out. It obviously motivates people to get involved with us. It's very successful. We're hoping to get it on a streaming platform soon. It will be at what's called the UN Film Festival, featured on October 20th in Palo Alto, for those of you who would be interested to attend that. And so I wanted to make that announcement. If any of you know somebody who works in film and might persuade one of the streaming platforms to feature our film, we'd greatly appreciate it. What we're told over and over is that these streaming services are not interested in social justice films any longer. They want films about true crime. And I keep telling everybody, well, radiation is a silent serial killer. It seems like this would qualify. We haven't persuaded them yet, but I will tell you that we hold out hope. We hold out great hope. Just recently, the chairman of the Democratic Caucus, Representative Aguilar from California, was in New Mexico for a fundraiser to help our members of Congress be reelected. And I got to meet with him face to face. And I said, I need an assurance that if we take back the House, if the Democrats take back the House, I need an assurance that you all will pass this bill. And he said, we will absolutely pass this bill. And he made that announcement publicly. So for us, hope springs eternal. And I will just tell you this. We have nothing to lose and everything to gain. When you have buried as many of your family members as we have, you realize that there's just nothing to lose and everything to gain. And so with that, I will end my presentation and I will entertain questions if there are any when the appropriate time is made available.
And I thank you all for your attention and your support.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cordova, for sharing everything you and your community have gone through and your efforts to have the U.S. redress the injustice. We will hold Q&A until after our next speaker. And now it is my honor to introduce Michelle Pierce, the Executive Director of Bayview Hunters Point Community Advocates. The Advocates are the oldest environmental justice nonprofit in San Francisco. In addition to supporting their efforts to reduce air pollution and electrify buildings in the Bayview, San Francisco Bay PSR has spent decades supporting their efforts to demand the cleanup of the radiation caused by the sandblasting in Bayview Hunters Point of the surfaces of Navy ships that had been contaminated from extensive nuclear testing in the Pacific. This happened shortly after the atomic bombings that destroyed Nagasaki and Hiroshima in 1945. We also supported the community's concerns about health hazards posed by the remnants of a World War II radiation experimentation lab that was located in the Bayview. All this harmful contamination remains 75 years later, and tonight we'll hear an update from the community's incredible work and resiliency. Michelle Pierce is a lifelong resident of Bayview Hunters Point and executive director of the Advocates. She has 20 years working in sustainability and social justice. She also has professional experience and training in commercial toxics reduction and business sustainability, including managing several projects with the San Francisco Department of the Environment. She is particularly adept at cultural competency and policy design, both of which were nurtured and polished while completing the Global Partners MBA program. She has an extensive history in environmental justice and activism in Bayview Hunters Point. And now I hand the mic to Ms. Pierce.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody who is attending this. It is so wonderful to see all of your faces, most of whom I have known since the Advocates was founded and have been right there alongside us in this war. So thank you very much. So heartwarming hearing Tina Cordova. Ma'am, thank you. This work is so hard. And it has taken this long for us to start seeing benefits. With that, I'm going to give you a background on us, the Advocates, as well as the Hunters Point Naval Shipyard, which is truly the offspring of what happened with Ms. Cordova's community, 100%. Our stepping into and founding of the Bayview Hunters Point Community Advocates coincided with two of our founders and current board members going to the White House in '94 when President Bill Clinton reauthorized the National Superfund legislation. So this is our legacy. And we were there because of this naval shipyard, which at that point in time, the community had been fighting to get the Navy and the federal government to acknowledge was the National Radiological Laboratory for the whole country. That's where all of the research happened. And for 30 years thereafter, the Navy denied that it existed. So this both acted as an acknowledgement that something happened and introduced us into this world. So we're very appreciative to have that conversation with you guys. Founded August of 1994. We are 30 years old at this point. I do want to go all the way back. We are the living with the sins or the results of the Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project spawned the National Radiological Laboratory. It was the only, so of course, the primary radiological laboratory for the entire nation. I want to recognize that the community was already pretty heavily burdened although industrial activities were spread throughout the city, a lot of it was concentrated in Bayview Hunters Point. One of the reasons that the Navy was so interested in actually buying the land that our national laboratory existed in is because it was at that time the largest dry dock due to the natural harbor in our neighborhood. It was the largest dry dock on the West Coast, and it remained such until the late 1980s when Seattle took over that claim to fame for the military. I believe in Long Beach is the largest commercial. So the Navy purchased the site specifically for radiological research, and the primary and still sometimes only acknowledged function of the radiological laboratory was to, number one, assemble the top half, the active half of Big Boy, the bomb that was dropped on Nagasaki, and as well to then receive the ships that the Navy had done experiments on out in the Bikini Atolls when they came back, because that, I want to stress this, that 5 years after what Ms. Cordova just talked about was when the Defense Department realized that, oh, we need to figure out how to decontaminate this. We need to figure out how to actually remove this radiation safely and successfully. We need to remove it from the ships, all materials, humans. So they sailed those ships out from our laboratory. They bombed them in the South Pacific. They brought them back. And they then spent a good 5 years trying to figure out how to decontaminate these ships and realized they couldn't. But behind the scenes, and what they don't talk about, is the fact that they also were doing experiments on humans and animals in order to figure out how to decontaminate us, mammals in general. They were also doing studies of wind currents and water currents along the West Coast, in which they were releasing radiological as well as biological toxins, weapons, toxins, and seeing how long those poisoned elements took to go up and down the West Coast via water and air. So there's a lot more going on than just that. Because no one knew that it was bad, supposedly, everything that was done was dumped in drains in the soil, buried here. When they realized things could not be decontaminated, the workers, by the way, predominantly Black, Italian, Chinese workers at this shipyard, were not provided with hazardous protections, clothing, PPE. We all know what that is now. No protective equipment for the workers who were charged with decontaminating and then disposing of. And when they realized that all the materials needed to be disposed of and they had no place to put it, they just went and they dumped it at the Farallones, very famous for seal watching, whale watching, and at a location just north of us, Vallejo, at a spot called Mariners Island. The funny thing about the parallel between the Hunters Point shipyard and Mariners Island is both of them are slated by our local governments to become luxury high-end housing. We're talking 700 square foot studios going for $1 to $1.5 million in both on this radiological land. We are trying to fight to make sure that this land is treated appropriately. By the way, in this shipyard, we have the best weather. We have the best views of the entire bay, of the Oakland Hills and the Berkeley Hills. Sometimes from certain locations, you can absolutely see both the Bay Bridge and the Golden Gate Bridge. $1.5 million on land that you are not allowed to eat the food that comes out of the soil. You are not allowed to allow your pets, your cats, your dogs, or your newborn babies or toddlers to dig in the soil, but it is supposedly safe for humans to live here. Just let that sink in. Also, the work that was done here when this laboratory was closing and closed, it spawned its own offspring in the two Lawrence laboratories in the Bay Area. Berkeley's Lawrence National Laboratory and the Lawrence Livermore Laboratory, both of those are offspring of this naval shipyard. It was not just humans, the ecology, and the ships that were being researched and developed for a number of years. A lot of the propulsion that usually happens out in the world on ships. So these engines of these submarines and these huge warships and these aircraft carriers, that technology came from us. I have to tell you guys that our organization is working on a community emissions reductions plan that is going to hold accountable officials and agencies in the state in order to get our air to be cleaner and held at cleaner. And I recently gave a presentation around redlining and current environmental justice communities nationally. And this is such a feature in this program. The work continues. The work will be continuing. And when it's not our work anymore, we will be passing the torch and continuing the fight with all other frontline communities as a result of this problem and this injustice is the best I can say. Thank you guys very much. I will take your questions along with Ms. Cordova just after this, but it has been lovely to be here and thank you guys for inviting me.
I just want to say that was amazing. Both of you are just so inspiring. It was powerful hearing the two of you back to back. That was just fantastic. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart that both of you were able to be here tonight to share your stories with us. At this point, we have about 5 to 10 minutes for questions. And I've been watching the chat. Hopefully our speakers have too, because there's been a few comments. Lots of gratitude still coming in there. But, any questions, this is your opportunity.
If there's not a question, Tova, I never did speak at all about how we had about 50 Indigenous elders, some young people, but primarily elders, travel 37 hours from New Mexico on a bus on Sunday. They left on Sunday morning. They traveled straight through. It was amazing to see them. Many of them had never been to Washington, D.C., and they traveled here and they brought their drums and their corn pollen, and they performed their own rituals, appealing to a higher power to basically seek discernment from Speaker Johnson, that he would figure out the right way to do the right thing. It was a blessing to be here with them and to walk the halls of Congress with them. These are people who stood in the rain for hours, actually. It drizzled, and their native people danced here in the Capitol. And it was just an amazing experience for me. The sad thing is they adjourned Congress this evening and went home, and they will not return until after Thanksgiving. And they did absolutely nothing. And while they do absolutely nothing, our loved ones continue to be diagnosed and die without access to health care. I mean, there's a gentleman on the trip with us who served as a Marine in Vietnam for 5 years. And when he returned, the best job available to him was in the mines. They talked about how their hard hats had monitors, and they would go underground, and every day they would check the monitors in their hard hats. And if they had reached a certain threshold, they would tell them to stay above ground for a few days. They knowingly used people's poverty against them, sent them into the mines without adequate protection, and now refuse to do anything to take care of them when they're suffering from pulmonary fibrosis, lung cancer, renal failure. And so I wanted to explain what the trip had been like. And these are people who will get back on a bus and travel 37 hours again to go home.
I mean, it's amazing they did it. It really is amazing. And it's just such powerful work you both do. We do have a question in the chat for, I think, both of you, actually. I was wondering if you have seen data on the mortality from these testing programs, either at the time or in the years since, and are researchers involved in your organizations?
I will say that Dr. Gould actually put a link to, we spent years with the community showing up to meetings with their information and their data and their stories, and government agencies showing up with their information and their stories, and then our local government coming up with a totally different set of data and information. And one of the things that we found hardest in terms of battling this situation was the fact that everybody had warring data and information. So we spent quite a few years actually compiling everything we could get our hands on that was in the digital sphere, and when we could actual hard copy paperwork. And UCSF was gracious enough to include us in with their tobacco files and their chemical files. We have our own data bank. It is there for everybody. It is fairly easy to use and navigate, simply because we in community compiled it. We wanted to make sure community had access to it as well. It is massive. The amount of data that is there across industries, across specialties is massive. And we put it there specifically to open it up to medical, scientific, and legal researchers who wanted to go through it, because we don't have time to go through all of it. So that link is in there for you guys. I saw Robin had her hand up and then took her hand back down. Dr. Cooper, sorry. But Tina, I don't know, do you guys have it? It's hard to find it. We find it, we compile it ourselves. It is just so much. Think about, Tina is talking about stuff from 60 to 80 years ago, people. So like, these are the records are there. When they're not there in the official record, they're there in the religious record. They're there. It's just so much. So I'll turn it over to you.
So there has never been an epidemiological study, which is unfortunate, and probably at this late date, 79 years later, it would be almost impossible to complete an epidemiological study. So many people have died and are gone now, and it would be difficult for us to account for who was alive at the time and what's happened to them since. We have collected a lot of health surveys. We started a health surveying process about 17 years ago, and we've collected a lot of health surveys. What's interesting is the government has sponsored, the National Cancer Institute has sponsored, recently a cancer risk assessment, but not a dose reconstruction or something that would be really useful in addressing what has happened. We've sort of skirted around this. The CDC did a 10-year study in New Mexico, and it had recommendations. One of the findings was that they believed that the people in New Mexico received 10,000 times what's considered, okay today. They believe that we received more radiation exposure at that level, 10,000 times what's considered safe today. And they had a list of recommendations, but our government never implemented that. They spent millions of dollars on this study and then never implemented any follow-up. Our government has never really wanted to know because then they would have to have some culpability for this. And so the reality is, we're victims. We're not scientists per se. These aren't things that we can undertake. We don't have the funding. You all know how much it would take to do something like this. And so I guess the answer is no, we've never had anybody address this in a meaningful way so that we could actually get to what this has meant. But what I can tell you is that these are not normal cancer histories that we have in our families. And it's multi-generational, and it's not going to go away for us.
Yeah. I apologize. I think what you both talked about was so thought-provoking. It took people a minute to come up with questions, but we really only have time for one more. And this one I think is for both of you as well, just going in order of time. What are the responses you've gotten? What do authorities say to avoid the responsibility?
Ms. Cordova, you take it first.
What they tell us over and over is that it's going to cost too much. Imagine the obscenity of them saying that to us. Now, they've been glad to relegate the expense of this to us. And I always say, we're hardworking, tax-paying American citizens that pledge allegiance to our flag. And if we owed money to the IRS, they wouldn't let us walk away from that responsibility. And by the way, all of us, everybody here today participating, we live in a world or a country based on some level of law and order. We couldn't recklessly, irreparably harm people. And then when we're held to account for it, say, it's really terrible and I'm sorry for what you've been through, but it's going to cost me too much to take care of you. So I'm going to just walk away from responsibility. And that's exactly what the US government has done in our case. And so their excuse is it's going to cost too much. Obscene.
Truly. I will say this, a favorite line in terms of health outcomes: causation is not correlation. And because we have really strange, weird cancers, they are not technically considered a cluster. So you can't have cancer cluster research necessarily. What they used to do was flood them with data when they ask for information, and these hardworking working class people, to quote Ms. Cordova, will have no idea or understanding. I will say I was studying biochem engineering when my mother first got into this. And so I acted as the translator for the community. And then that grew into being the translator for the larger EJ community in California, because that was a favorite technique. I also want to say that as a result of that, we have some EJ leaders who barely finished high school, who at this point have as many papers published as most of the doctors and professors in this forum, because we have had to. And then the tactics change. My favorite line, whenever I do something like this, or whenever I am confronting the quote unquote authorities that we are battling, is to say, prove us wrong. Because to Ms. Cordova's point, they're always, it's too expensive, it's too expensive, it's too expensive, and you don't know what you're talking about. It's too expensive and you can't prove the causation. My response is, we're broke. And one of the things that government, local all the way up to feds, say about our situation is we're stuck living here because of poverty and genetics. And you know what? You're kind of right. We can't move anywhere else. We can't afford to figure this out. So put your money and your brains where your mouth is and prove us wrong. You come in here and show me, as opposed to me proving to you that I'm right. That's the best I can do. Hopefully my email is attached in here somewhere. Anybody with questions, please email us. Make arrangements to come through. We have an elders corner specifically for those folks that Ms. Cordova was alluding to. The elders come and sit and hang out and chill. They have a massage. We have a massage chair in there and pass knowledge on to the younger generations. So, because there are lots of questions in here that I would love to address for you guys.
Ms. Pierce, it's really gracious of you. I don't see your email. I see Tina's email. Just, you know, I don't
dropping
I
it
don't want
in
to
right
force
now.
you to put it good. Okay, great. Actually, I'm going to message you offline. But that was just amazing. That was wonderful. Thank you both so much. That was absolutely fantastic. Okay. Well, thank you both for taking your time out of your night to be with us. We are so grateful. At this point, I am happy to introduce SFBayPSR board member, Dr. Mary Williams, retired UCSF pediatric dermatologist and current activist extraordinaire. Mary, I hand the mic to you.
Thank you, Tova, and thanks to our speakers. I'm so moved by what I heard and enraged at the same time. So thank you both. Moving on to our youth program, fostering the development of the next generation of health activists is one of the cornerstones of SFBayPSR's mission. Both our internship and our annual awards recognizing young health activists were started in 2017 through a bequest from the late Dr. Thomas Livingston Hall. In Dr. Hall's long career in public health, he delivered care in rural Puerto Rico. He planned with the World Health Organization a national health workforce and directed population studies at the University of North Carolina. From 1988 to 1996, he directed a postdoctoral HIV/AIDS prevention research program at UCSF. And after retiring, he continued working with a consortium of universities for global health until his death. Our youth programs are really among our highlights. So tonight we have the special ask to ensure that this important fund of Dr. Hall's can continue, and we can continue to support our future leaders. Our goal tonight is to raise $5,000 for 2025 interns and the awards program. And this will fund 3 to 4 future interns and provide the financial awards to next year's health activist awardees. So please consider making a donation tonight, and the link is posted again in the chat. I'd like to start by telling you about our internship program, and following that, I will introduce our 2024 Young Emerging Health Activist awardees. Our internship program is designed to teach the next generation of health professionals the skills of activism, leadership, organizing, and advocacy in the areas of concentration, namely nuclear weapons abolition, climate change, environmental health, and the intersecting social and racial justice issues. We are so proud of our former interns who continue to their health advocacy as they move on in public health and medical education or further public health progress through research or allied organizations. One of our former interns, Allie Smith, said about the program, "I'm so grateful for the many opportunities I had to be mentored by folks at SFBayPSR. This internship allowed me opportunities to craft and deliver public comment, write advocacy letters, and learn about nonprofit fundraising and communication strategies. I'm indebted to the time and patience of many staff and members who guided and supported me in these activities." Our current interns are doing amazing work. Our nuclear weapons abolition interns, Navri Purawal and Kelly Lynn, are organizing online screening and discussion of the film Silent Fallout, coming up on Thursday, October 3rd. This award-winning film addresses the devastating impacts of radioactive fallout in the U.S., stemming from the 101 above-the-ground nuclear tests that were conducted by our government. We invite all of you to attend and pass the word on to your friends and colleagues. The link to register will be in the chat. And keep your eyes out this fall for an infographic series by our current environmental health intern, Miguel Mercado. This is designed to educate the public about the health harms of air pollution caused by the growing number of Amazon and other distribution centers, with the attendant increased truck traffic near these Central Valley communities. I think you briefly got a look at Miguel. There he is. We'd like to continue to support the activism training of our young people through our internship program. Please help make Dr. Hall's generous gift live on through donating again tonight to this educational fund. And we'll post that link again for you one more time. Thank you so much. And now I have the great pleasure of introducing the winners of our 2024 SFBayPSR's awards for activism that are given to health science students, postgraduate trainees, and early health professionals. And each year we look to offer 3 to 4 such awards to honor work in one of our chapter's 3 major areas of focus: nuclear abolition, social justice, and environmental health. And each of our 4 awardees will receive an award certificate and a check for $250. Our first awardee, Kavya Nambiar, is a third-year medical student at UCSF by way of the UC Berkeley-UCSF Joint Medical Program. As a Berkeley undergraduate, she participated in research on domestic violence and human rights. Before entering the Joint Medical Program, she worked for a year on health policy as a U.S. Senate intern. Her master's thesis at Berkeley focused on how to decolonize health services at the U.S.-Mexico border, working directly with American physician volunteers and partnering with Mexican health workers. She also worked with the UC Berkeley Human Rights Center and served as a student representative to the UC Berkeley's Anti-Oppression Curriculum Initiative. Even in this early stage of her medical training, Kavya has demonstrated remarkable creativity and initiative in championing anti-racism in the university and beyond. Kavya, we honor your achievements and commitments to health justice. And now Kavya will say a few words.
Hi, everyone. I wanted to start by thanking the SF Bay Area Physicians for Social Responsibility for this award and honor. Specifically, I wanted to thank Dr. Rohini Har, who has been one of the most influential mentors that I've had since I was an undergraduate student. Not only has she been an incredible example in how to use a position as a physician to move forward human rights, but I wouldn't have been able to do this work without her unwavering belief in me and my ideas. It's only with her support and the support of my mentors at the Joint Medical Program and UCSF that I was able to do my work at the border and work on my thesis that was about provider perspectives on decolonizing global health. Working alongside and learning from Mexican providers and refugees about their experiences really taught me about the importance of building meaningful and cross-cultural relationships in research, being clear about your values, and always being critical of power. And these are lessons I will carry with me in my future career. Something else I think about in my work in global and refugee health is the importance of intersectional and interdisciplinary learning, and advocacy that brings together different disciplines and voices. I'm constantly reminded of the Rudolf Virchow quote, "Medicine is social science and politics nothing but medicine on a grand scale." And so I feel really grateful to be a part of the PSR community and the larger Bay Area community of physicians who are working on advocacy and leading the way in working on imagining and creating a more better, equitable world. Thank you.
Congratulations, Kavya. And now our next awardee is Dr. Alan Nadovu. Alan is presently an emergency medicine resident at Highland Hospital. While a medical student at UCSF, Alan worked on the incorporation of climate health topics into the medical school curriculum, both at UCSF and which has served as a template for other medical schools in the US and abroad. Tonight, we honor Dr. Nadovu's remarkable work on climate health education. Dr. Nadovu is on duty tonight and unable to join us in person. In lieu of that, he has sent us a brief video. You'll be able to hear about his work in more detail directly from him. So please start the Nadovu video.
Hey everyone, I'm sad that I won't be able to attend this event live with you today, but I wanted to express my gratitude to the Bay Area chapter of Physicians for Social Responsibility for this award. While I was at UCSF, I was fortunate enough to be involved in several projects and initiatives around climate change and health. Most of my work focused on educating physicians about the interactions between climate change and health. I worked on pieces that advocated for the inclusion of climate health content into medical school curricula. I worked with faculty at UCSF to develop materials for our own school, and I helped lead Climate Resources for Health Education, an international collaboration that aims to build an open source repository of climate change and health content. I was also lucky enough to do a year of research with Tariq Ben-Marnia's lab, where we examined the effects of extreme heat on pediatric patients in California. I think all this work has been incredibly insightful and has helped prepare me for a future career continuing to work at the intersection of climate and health. Again, I'm really sorry that I couldn't make it today, but thank you for the award, and I hope to collaborate with some of you in the future. Take care.
Let's give a round of applause for Dr. Nadovu. And our next awardee is Dr. Amenta Kwiute. Dr. Kwiute is presently also an emergency medicine resident at Highland Hospital and unable to be with us this evening. Even before medical school, Amita advocated for health equity through more than 8 years of service with the San Francisco Department of Public Health, Alameda County Public Health Department, and Children's Hospital Oakland. While at UC Berkeley Joint Program, she focused on anti-racism and health equity through her role as a scholar in the medical education for urban underserved. This work culminated in a master's thesis that developed a curriculum on anti-racism in medical education for a national training organization, and she's been teaching anti-racism and anti-oppression courses at the graduate level. She also founded the UC Berkeley chapter of White Coats for Black Lives and secured a grant for the program, a program that mentors and prepares underrepresented minority students to enter the medical field. And she worked with the Oakland Dreams Youth. Tonight, we honor Dr. Kwiute's tireless work to bring anti-racism training to future health professionals at the beginning of their education, efforts that have expanded nationally and will contribute to the goal of eradicating racism from medicine. And I believe we have a video from Dr. Kwiute.
Dr. Williams, we actually have her here live in person.
Oh, how wonderful.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. Both Alan and I are on really intensive rotations in our intern year. I am currently on my trauma surgery rotation, so hence the Barry Scrubs. If you're familiar with Highland, you know what that's like. I just wanted to say I'm so grateful for this recognition and humbled to be one of the recipients of this award this year. receiving this was a beautiful moment to reflect on the radical activists and the change makers in my community, from my grandparents to my parents, my family and friends that helped me tend to the fire inside that is needed to carry this work forward through these difficult times. I just want to say thank you. This has also been an amazing opportunity to reflect on the projects that I've been a part of with support of incredible physicians in the Bay Area. And I specifically wanted to highlight a few of my mentors who are actually here tonight. And they're part of the PSR community. I wanted to highlight Dr. Shalene Stein, Dr. Aisha Mays, Dr. Leanna Lewis, and Dr. Monica Hahn for supporting my career at every level and connecting me to this beautiful community of physicians and leaders. And I also, if it's okay, wanted to take a moment to provide some updates. Now as a resident, I'm able to reflect on the projects that we started as medical students. And it's so wonderful because there's also so many medical students here who are part of the JMP who are carrying this work forward. So shout out to our students who are carrying on the White Coats for Black Lives program. There are now students who started as freshmen in our program who are entering their first and second years of medical school. There are mentors who participated in our program who matched into their dream residency programs, myself included. And I just want to say thank you so much to the incredible students that are carrying this work forward, speaking out against genocide, speaking out against injustices in our community, who are inspired, supported, and held by the members of the PSR community. I also wanted to give a plug for our Dream Youth Clinic Community Garden. It was such an honor to learn from Dr. Aisha Mays and to see what it truly means to build a project literally rooted in the community and to haul what I would say is probably a metric ton of dirt to create this beautiful garden that has now produced more zucchinis than I think any of us could have possibly imagined, and offered a space for a community to realize and grow their dreams. So I just, again, wanted to say thank you so much. I appreciate to the leadership everything that you do for our community. To the members of this community that I have yet to meet, I'm so excited to meet you, and I'm just getting started. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Guillen. Congratulations. And last, but certainly not least, tonight we honor Dr. Katie Lichter. Katie is presently a resident in radiation oncology at UCSF and a climate health research and policy fellow with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Her work focuses on the intersection of climate change and healthcare, advocating for healthcare decarbonization. After building skills in life cycle assessment, she founded UCSF's Green Health Lab, where she leads over 20 participating investigators in decarbonization projects. She has received several national grants, including for wildfire impacts on cancer care and the carbon footprint of medical conferences. Although still in training, her CV reads like one put forward for promotion to assistant professor. She has been invited to give multiple lectures and trainings locally, nationally, and abroad on decarbonization. And she has 35 peer-reviewed publications, many in this area, with several others in the pipeline. In collaboration with SFBayPSR, she and colleagues developed the Network Greener, which is a carbon calculator tool, and this has been used to stimulate professional societies of oncologists to adopt climate policies. Katie, we are pleased to honor your fierce dedication to decarbonizing the healthcare system and your many accomplishments and awards along the way. And now Dr. Lichter will say a few words.
Good evening, and thank you so much to PSR and the incredible sponsors for this award. I'm truly deeply honored to be recognized along such inspiring leaders and change makers. When I first entered the healthcare field, I was training during a time of crises. Wildfires were burning across California, and the global pandemic was raging all around us. It truly was overwhelming to witness firsthand the devastating impacts on our patients and the healthcare workforce. But I quickly found myself surrounded by a community of dedicated advocates and leaders within PSR who are committed to tackling these critical issues head on. I'm especially grateful to PSR for enabling young research and advocates like myself and my colleagues at Green Health Lab to come together and grow as physicians, scientists, and activists in this space. However, as we heard from tonight's keynote speaker, Tina, the work is far from finished. The health of our communities remain at risk, and unless we address environmental degradation, we will continue to see patients walking into our clinics suffering from the very impacts we're fighting to prevent. I'm deeply inspired by the incredible work of the fellow awardees tonight, and I look forward to growing together as advocates and activists. As the saying goes, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. I truly believe that we will go far in this fight for environmental justice, health equity, and a healthier future for all. Thank you again. I'm deeply honored.
Congratulations, Dr. Lichter. And please join me in a big round of applause and appreciation for our upcoming leaders in health activism. Thank you all. And now it is my honor to introduce SFBayPSR board member, Dr. Rohini Har.
Thank you, Mary. As you know, tonight is about celebrating the SFBayPSR community and all the great work we have done over the past year. And it is also about making sure we can continue that work. So thank you for buying tickets, becoming sponsors, and making donations to the Tom Hall Student and Young Professionals Fund. Supporting students and young people, like you just saw, is perhaps the biggest step any of us can take to improving the world. They have the energy, the smarts, and the motivation to make it happen. So please do support them however much you can. There is still time to make donations to help us reach our goal of $5,000 tonight. The link is in the chat. While you do, let me tell you about why I support and why I love our SF Bay Area PSR. I'm an ER doctor by training, and I'm deeply committed to social justice, human rights, and climate justice. When I moved to California exactly 10 years ago, I was looking for a place that focuses on these things. And PSR has been doing it for more than 50 years, has won a Nobel Peace Prize for our nuclear weapons abolition work. And with the war in Ukraine and the heightened nuclear threat, I am even more grateful for SFBayPSR's hard work on this issue. But we're continuing to evolve and stay modern and relevant. We're continuing to advocate against nuclear weapons, but we're also focused on climate health and racial equity now more than ever. And as a health worker, PSR is a home where I can find current information on what social responsibility in health means and take action on things that are important, not just for health, but for our entire community. It's pretty exciting to see a new generation of socially and environmentally conscious communities taking shape, and we get to work with them too. All of this work takes funding to pay staff to manage and organize advocacy efforts, events like this, and communications to the public and media. Staff and volunteers work hard to research and produce talking points, letters, those action alerts you get in the mail, and news so that we busy health professionals can easily step in and advocate. We also need funding for meetings and community-led and student projects. I promise you that every dollar is used wisely, and I do look at those budgets. So thank you. Tova, I hand the mic back to you.
Well, dear guests, it is time to say goodnight. But first, I want to say a few thank yous. Congratulations again to our awardees. Thank you to our individual sponsors and institutional sponsors. Our generous sponsors make it possible for SFBayPSR to combine the power of community activism with the knowledge and credibility of health professionals to promote public policies that support human and environmental health. Thank you to Tina Cordova and Michelle Pierce. Thank you to our GALA committee, speakers, and staff, Bob Gould, Rohini Har, Mary Williams, Jeff Ritterman, Patrice Sutton, Marge Plum, Giselle Bergmeyer, Libby Benedict, and Julie Lindo. Thank you to our interns, Navreet, Kelly, and Miguel. Thank you for buying tickets and donating. Thank you, everyone, for making this a memorable and special community gathering, as well as a successful fundraiser. By joining us this evening, you've helped us to support our future activist leaders, community partners, and to defend health and demand justice. We look forward to sharing our work with you in the future. Please enjoy the rest of your evening.
Hard to leave after such a wonderful night.
Thanks everyone for coming
We
out.
could come off mute for a minute and say hello to each other.
Thanks, everyone.
This is a great group,
Thank you,
and I'm proud to be
everyone.
part of it.
Yeah.